All right, let's talk about a lawsuit that just about everyone has heard of, but almost no one knows the real story behind: the McDonald's hot coffee case. For decades, right, this case has been the go-to punchline. It's held up as the perfect example of a legal system gone completely off the rails, a symbol of our supposedly sue-crazy culture. But is that what really happened? You know the story, or at least the one you think you know. It's almost like a cartoon in its simplicity, right? A woman spills coffee on herself, sues a giant company, and walks away with a ridiculous amount of money. That narrative spread like wildfire, but as we're about to see, it left out pretty much all of the important details. So, let's push past all those headlines and jokes. Let's really look at what happened, at the actual events that brought this case to court, because the reality is so much more serious than the story we've all been told. Okay, first things first, and this is a big one. Stella Liebeck was not driving. Not even close. Her grandson had actually pulled the car over and parked it so she could add cream and sugar to her coffee. She put the cup between her knees to get a good grip, but when she tried to pull the lid off, the whole thing tipped over, dumping scalding hot coffee right into her lap. And we are not talking about a minor burn here. You know, the kind you might get from splashing something in the kitchen. No way. This coffee caused devastating third-degree burns. That's the most severe kind you can get. It literally destroys the skin all the way down to the muscle and fatty tissue. The results were just horrific. These burns covered 16% of her body. She spent 8 days in the hospital, had to go through multiple agonizing skin graft surgeries, and then faced a 2-year recovery, a process that left her permanently disfigured. So, this is how it all ended up in court. You see, Stella Liebeck had never sued anyone in her life. She wasn't looking for some giant payday. She just wrote a letter to McDonald's and asked for $20,000 to help cover her actual medical expenses. McDonald's response? They offered her $800. Well, with no other choice, she hired a lawyer, and the case went to trial. And it was during that process, when her legal team started digging, that they uncovered some truly shocking information about McDonald's own policies for its coffee. This number right here, this is the key to the entire case. McDonald's had a corporate rule that required all of its franchises to serve coffee at a blistering 180 to 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, to put that in perspective, the coffee you make at home, that's usually around 150 degrees. This wasn't just hot, it was dangerously, unreasonably hot. And this comparison really shows you why that temperature matters so much. At 180 degrees, a liquid can give you a full-thickness third-degree burn in just 2 to 7 seconds. That's not even enough time to react. But at a safer temperature, say 150 degrees, it would take about a full minute to cause that same level of injury. That huge difference in reaction time, that was really at the heart of the whole case. And get this, Stella Liebeck's case wasn't some freak accident. During the trial, it came out that between 1982 and 1992, McDonald's had gotten over 700 reports from customers who had been burned by its coffee. Some of them were children, and many of these were serious injuries. They absolutely knew this was a recurring problem. So what did they say when they were confronted with these 700 prior burn cases? A McDonald's executive actually testified that the number was statistically insignificant when you compare it to the billions of cups of coffee they sell. Jurors later said that this dismissive attitude really showed them how little the company cared about customer safety. But maybe the most jaw-dropping moment of the whole trial came from McDonald's own quality assurance manager. He admitted under oath that their coffee was sold at a temperature that made it undrinkable. He acknowledged it was dangerous right at the point of sale, and that it would burn your mouth and throat if you tried to drink it right away. Just incredible. So the jury hears all of this evidence, right? And they come back with a decision. Let's break down the verdict that ended up making headlines all over the world. Okay, so the jury awarded her $200,000 in what's called compensatory damages. That's for her medical bills and all the pain and suffering. They did find that Stella was 20% at fault, so they reduced that amount by $40,000. But the huge number, the punitive damages, was $2.7 million. And that wasn't just pulled out of thin air. The jury calculated it to be about what McDonald's makes from coffee sales in just 2 days. And listen, even the trial judge, who would later reduce that award, had some really harsh words for the company. He completely backed up the jury's finding, saying McDonald's had shown a shocking disregard for the safety of its customers. So here's the crucial point that almost everyone misses. Stella Liebeck never got millions of dollars. The judge lowered the punitive damages to $480,000, which brought the total down to $640,000. McDonald's appealed that, and in the end, the two sides settled out of court for a confidential amount that's reported to be less than $500,000. So, how on earth did a case with all these serious facts become a national symbol for greed and silliness? Well, the answer really lies in how the story was told, and maybe more importantly, what was left out of the telling. The first wave of news reports focused almost entirely on that big, shocking verdict number. All the critical context, like the third-degree burns, the company's long history of knowing about the danger, and the fact that the final amount was way lower, all of that got lost in the rush for a catchy, simple headline. And as the story spread from local news to national TV, it just got shorter and shorter. It became a soundbite. Woman, coffee, millions. It was easy, it was digestible, and it was a completely misleading narrative that just stuck. I think this quote from one of the jurors really gets to the heart of it. The jury wasn't just looking at one accident. They were looking at a whole pattern of behavior where a giant corporation treated over 700 cases of real human suffering as just a rounding error on their balance sheet. When you strip away all the jokes and the myths, this case was always about corporate responsibility. What started as a simple, reasonable request to cover medical bills became a national punchline, all because the most important parts of the story got lost in translation. So I'll ask you, does knowing the full story change your verdict? This is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This is not legal advice.